So I'm gonna set it to go live, and we are live.
All right, welcome everyone. This is the finale for the 16th ever Fluent in 3 Months challenge. And as a part of the finale, we are going to answer a few of the questions that were submitted by our participants in advance. And then we're also going to give our finalists the chance to ask our panelists questions, as well as announce the winners for this challenge. But before we get started, I want to make sure to give our panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. So today we have Hannah Kentridge. Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Hannah. I have a YouTube channel under the username Miss Hanake, where I make videos in Japanese. I've been studying Japanese since I was a teenager for about 10 years now, and I'm currently doing a master's degree in Japanese studies at the University of Oxford. Nice to meet you all.
And of course, as always, we have Benny Lewis.
How's everybody doing today? Great to see everybody making the immense progress they did in their challenges. It's always an honor that my wee 3-month missions have expanded to have so many other people doing their own. So I'm always humbled and very proud when I see the progress everybody makes.
And I'm Shannon Kennedy, the head coach of the Fluent in 3 Months challenge. So now I would like to give each of our finalists the opportunity to introduce themselves. I'd like you to say your name, what language you learned, and what you got out of the challenge. I'm going to go in the order that I see you. So Randy, you're first.
Hi, everybody. Randy Corsi. I'm in Austin, Texas, and I was doing advanced Italian. I did the previous one in Italian. I started with that. These challenges have taken me so much farther than I ever thought in a short period of time. I did Japanese on the first one. I learned a lot from that and carried those lessons on to the next one. So each one, I don't want to say gets easier, but it gets simpler, I guess would be a good way to put it. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Brittany.
Hi, Brittany Williams, and for this challenge, I took the advanced Japanese, and I guess my takeaway for this time, since it's my second challenge, I guess was learning to work within limitations, because I think sometimes we kind of think we are superhuman and we can do way more than, what our body wants and other obligations. I had a lot happening during the challenge, and I just had to learn to be like, okay, you know what, maybe I didn't get my 30 minutes today, but I did 10 or I did 20. That's still really good. So it's still helping me my consistency. So yeah.
Sterling.
Sorry, it took me a moment to unmute. My name is Berling Shuri. I live in Seattle, Washington. This advanced challenge was for Spanish, and I started with German. Then I did a year-long study of Spanish. Now the next challenge is moving on to a different language. What I got out of this is discipline and the ability to keep coming back to language learning. Because if I didn't have this kind of discipline set up, I'd go 2 weeks and then it'd be over. So, and I've always had a goal since I was a little kid to learn and be able to speak to people in their own language, which is a huge thing, because how many languages are there in the world? So I've had to scale it back. I'm getting what I can with the time that I have. So thank you. This has been, and everybody's support here has been incredible. I've had a couple of challenges where it was all plateau and reverse, but the people here helped me come back again and again. Thank you.
All right, Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Tobiason, and I live in Aurora, Colorado. And I have really enjoyed this challenge because, as other folks have said, the discipline, I work really good with deadlines, and normally you don't have deadlines. So that was huge, just having that responsibility every day to do the yay nay report and kind of do the check-ins and the videos and that sort of thing. But I think the emphasis on speaking and really getting my courage up, watching other people do it, watching their videos. And I'm very fortunate that I have, I teach English second language, so I have some Spanish speakers. I have a lot of other languages, but I've tapped on all of my Spanish speaking students to be my exchange partners and talk with them. And now our whole class is doing walk and talks, and it's kind of benefiting everyone. So I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate the community as well. Just seeing everybody else here and the other folks in the challenge post their high points and low points, and knowing that we can get through it together.
Thank you. Ian.
Hi, yeah, I'm Ian. I'm from Britain, but I live in Berlin in Germany with my Greek wife. So hence I've been learning Greek with this challenge. And I think I have learned loads of things, but I thought you might ask this question. So I forced myself to choose on one, and that's, I think it's how big a motivator for me measuring progress is. So I was actually really surprised at what a big difference these recordings that we did made to how motivated I was. And like the videos that we made, coupled with I actually started doing like monologues of myself, and even over the kind of periods of weeks, I could just see me making progress, and that was like a huge motivator for me. So that, and also like little things that they're not perfect measurements, but they just really keep me motivated, like the word count going up and up, and on LinkQ and things like that. They really motivated me more than I realized that they would. And like I've even started trying to kind of write down little things that I've achieved, such as like I luckily and very fortunately in terms of timing just got back from Greece on holiday. So I've like kind of started writing down, oh, I ordered food at a restaurant in this month, and in Greek, and I booked tickets for the ferry, and I actually even managed to like get into a small argument with someone on the ferry in Greek. And that was maybe my biggest achievement, actually. So, but I'm trying to keep a record of these, and like I guess, yeah, the biggest thing was realizing how much these things motivate me. And it also has motivated me a lot to see how other people do things differently, and it's good to like see everyone in person now. Well, not in person, but in Zoom life.
Thank you. It's awesome that you're writing these things down. It'll be good for later on. All right, Erin.
Yeah, so my name is Erin Paulus, and this is my first challenge. I was doing French. It was kind of an extension of me starting up with French again on my birthday in 2020, because what else are you going to do in 2020? So what I would like to do, and hopefully this is okay, I don't know if I'll have another chance to nerd out about a podcast, but we have some podcasters here. So I did want to say how much that the Language Hacking podcast means to me, and how motivating that has been. And it's the amount of just like tips and tricks, and also just, you'll hear about people that have a different approach, but then you'll hear about someone who has a similar outlook. And it's just, that is what caused me to do this challenge. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you please keep doing that. And this challenge was my way of kind of just writing my way into that story. And also, it's podcast plus, because you can see everyone else's stories. So that's been incredibly motivating to keep me plugged in. It is dangerous because I see all the languages I want to do. So otherwise, it's great. Thank you.
I can't avoid a little shameless self-promotion for Benny and I. So the podcast she's referring to is the Language Hacking Podcast, and you can learn more at languagehacking.com. All right. So thank you everyone for introducing yourselves, for being here today. And before we get into what I know you're all waiting for, so we're going to hold that off to the end, I want to give you the opportunity to ask our amazing panelists any questions that you might have. So who would like to jump in first? Randy, you're unmuted.
Okay.
Go for it.
I'm I'm trying to decide what to do next. I've kind of worked out a schedule to start to bring the Japanese back in and keep the Italian going. So now I'm trying to decide between French and Mandarin. And because to me, those are like two of the, I don't want to say strangest, but the like the accents, the pronunciations, to me sound kind of difficult. So I apart from the usual subjects, like, do you have a need to learn it and things like that, what would help me to decide between those two languages, considering I've already done Japanese and Italian? Obviously with, English, Italian, and French are interrelated because of the Latin origins. When I was in third grade, my two older sisters had the 33 RPM records, for anybody that could remember those. And they were learning French and I was better at it than they were. But I've got to, I'm just trying to decide between Mandarin. Now, again, the characters set on the kanji and the Chinese characters, I know there's, a correlation there. So that's why I wanted to learn Japanese first also. So I think that would help there, but I still can't decide between the two. I don't know. I'm not sure which way to go.
Hannah, do you want to jump in before I go for this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, of course, Mandarin will help you with your kanji in Japanese. I mean, in my Japanese degree, I have classmates who are Chinese people who've come to England to study Chinese people who've come to England to study Japanese, and they always have, they always do better because they're not spending so much energy working on the kanji and they can focus on other things. And obviously, they always have very, very good kanji. But I mean, the grammar and the pronunciation and everything else is so completely different from Japanese. Whereas I think, obviously, French and Italian are Romance languages, they're more closely related, and so it might not be as big a leap in terms of grammar and structure. But I mean, I think it also depends, like, how far do you want to go with your Japanese, because learning Chinese is only going to be useful for your Japanese if you're really wanting to be able to read and write Japanese very, very, very well. So I guess it just kind of depends how you want to spend your time and what you want to focus on, and also I guess what your strengths in learning a language are. Like if you're more confident in your ability to pick up, I don't know, yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Fair enough. So I would personally say that when it comes to learning Mandarin, yes, the Hansa, the characters, that a lot of which you would recognize from kanji, are beneficial to you in the grand scope of the big project of learning Chinese. But it's not necessarily going to help you much with learning Mandarin. And especially because, unlike Japanese, Chinese has this extra useful thing that we can use pinyin. So you can use just the romanized characters to read it. So to actually speak Mandarin, the characters aren't even going to be that big an advantage. But if everything is equal, like if your goal is speaking Mandarin, that's why I say the characters come in a little bit later in the process and not necessarily helping you earlier. But if everything else is being equal, personally, I would prioritize the European language, only because as you learn each new language, you're also learning a kind of tertiary skill, which for me happened to be very beneficial that I did all European languages first before I went to non-European languages, because I got better at learning languages. And it meant that eventually when I did get to Asian languages, I had honed my skill as a language learner, that they became inherently that extra bit easier. Whereas I think if I had taken on one of those languages earlier, then I would have had the challenge of dealing with this very different language. Like in terms of Mandarin, you obviously have to deal with the tones, and tones isn't something you've had to work on up to now. So that'll be its own extra challenge. And that's on top of any other issues. So personally, I would prioritize, if you have no other like true motivation, I would prioritize French first and like get that to a good level. And in that process, you're going to become an even better language learner. And then this would mean that later on, when you do decide, okay, I'm ready for Mandarin, you would actually learn it better then than you would now because of the extra tricks of just like expanding your brain's capacity to learn yet another language. That you would learn French faster just because it's closer, and then you learn Mandarin faster later because you're a better language learner. So that's kind of, if everything else is equal, obviously if there's a true reason and motivation to help you with Mandarin, then that would prioritize that. But everything else being equal, I would recommend French in that case.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to throw something a little bit different into this equation here, because for me, the decision is not so theoretical. Sometimes there's a little bit of emotion in it. And so for me, one of the things that I do is I flip a coin. And I know this sounds like really subjective, but I learned this trick from Lindsay Williams of Lindsay Does Languages. And I get this question as a language encourager at Fluent in 3 Months a lot. And it's worked for everyone that I've suggested it to. So one side of the coin is Chinese and one side of the coin is French. And you flip the coin and you will find that naturally you are either happy with the result or disappointed with the result. And no matter what, this is going to happen. And if you feel that little bit of disappointment, that is a big indicator that the other language is the language you need to study. And if you don't, then that it's the language that you got the coin flip for that you do need to study. So this strategy works really, really well. And I highly suggest just trying it out, even if ultimately your decision ends up being based on other things. Sometimes just going with your gut is the right decision, because, you know, whether a language is easier or not to learn because of different characteristics of the language, your motivation is going to be an even bigger factor in this. So whatever you are, and if you, I understand not being sure, like off the top of your head, okay, which language do I actually want to learn? Sorry, my son is trying to join the call. You know, sometimes your gut is going to be the better option because that's the language you're truly motivated to learn and the one that you're going to have the most success with. All right, Erin, you have a question?
Well, I have millions of questions, but so you've all kind of found your own way and charted your own path. So I guess my question is, how do you remember exactly what it was that made you confident in the way that you were learning a language, even if that evolved over time, and willing to kind of go your own way versus falling into the trap that just basically, oh, well, I'm doing this thing right now in my language and it's not the most efficient way to do it, and so I should do this other thing. Because again, when you see all the things, you're just like, well, maybe that's the right thing. Maybe I should just run off and do that. But how did you find your path? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Hannah, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, I think so I made videos as I was learning Japanese, and obviously that became my YouTube channel. But at the beginning, I was making videos for myself, basically, and I just happened to have a few people who were watching. And, you know, in the same way that you guys all made videos for the challenge, I found it super, super motivational to be able to look back at a video of myself and think, oh, I made a mistake there, or I made a mistake there. I would do better at that now. And also, actually, the process of editing videos and actually really, really listening to yourself, I just found that really worked for me. And I don't know if I would have kept up my Japanese quite as well if I hadn't decided to start making videos. Yeah, so I guess that was my path, and it also just ended up becoming a YouTube channel in the same way. But I did at a point, because I was teaching myself as a teenager, I did get to a point where I thought, I need to kind of level up somehow. I do want to be speaking more grown-up Japanese, because I was speaking very colloquial teenager Japanese, and that's what motivated me to do a degree in Japanese studies. So my path kind of changed, and I'm not self-studying anymore. I'm being taught, which is very different. And yeah, I mean, I personally think that as long as you're doing something, that's better than nothing. And I think so often people spend so long wondering what's the best method to do this. Am I being efficient? Am I getting anything done? Is this going into my brain? But I think as long as you're doing something and the language you want to learn is in your life in some way, even if that's, you know, watching Netflix in that language on the weekends, that's enough. And you know, it's not going to be always like this. It'll be up and down as you progress. And so I think it's fine to have some kind of wobbles and some dips and some kind of losing motivation and gaining motivation. I think the most important thing is to just keep at it in some way or another.
Absolutely. So one problem I have whenever I'm asked questions in these things is that a lot of you may already know the answer I'm going to give because you've seen me do it in one of my videos previously. But essentially, with Spanish, the first language that I truly attempted, I did have certain approaches that were ineffective for several months. And I went to group lessons and I was the worst in the class, and they kind of just emulated the same thing that I was doing in high school with German, and I didn't really feel like it was helping me that much. I tried to like even study the dictionary at one stage. It was like I was completely devoid of any useful ideas. And what would eventually become Speak from Day One, the concept of I really just have to use this language on a day-to-day basis. I started that, and I did indeed have a light bulb moment that changed my understanding of how this is actually helping me move forward in the language, where I had just bought an electric toothbrush and it broke, and I was so furious about it that I stormed into the supermarket and I wanted to get a refund. And I realized because of the emotion, I didn't actually take the time to look up any important words ahead of time. So I didn't know how to say refund. I didn't know how to say toothbrush. I didn't know how to say broken. But because I had the momentum of just speak, just sound like Tarzan, just say whatever you know, I was just saying things like, tooth machine bad, money round trip. And what happened that really blew my mind in that moment was I succeeded in getting a refund for my broken toothbrush, even though I didn't know refund, toothbrush, or broken. And that showed me that there was definitely something to this Speak from Day One approach, that maybe making mistakes is okay. I don't have to have perfect Spanish, and I can still achieve this goal of communication. So that was the light bulb moment for me after multiple other things I had tried that had completely failed me with Spanish. So hopefully that somewhat addresses your question, Aaron, but that was my big moment for me many years ago when I first got into all of this.
All right, thank you both. Brittany, you have a question?
Yeah, mine's pretty basic, but yeah, I was kind of burned out from this challenge. Like on top of this, I had like lots of weird home improvement things happening, and I was wondering what is a good way to, I guess, like get yourself back, I guess, on the saddle from taking like a bit of a break from studying.
Hannah?
I would say, as I was saying, that there's going to be times you're motivated and not motivated, but it's good to just keep the language in your life. So even if you don't feel motivated at all to study, you don't want to look at a book, you don't want to look at an app, you don't want to do any of it, just find a Netflix series in that language, or find, a video game, a book, anything, something that you're genuinely interested in. And that might take a couple tries. You have to try a couple different Netflix shows. I think that if you can find something that brings that language back into your life in a way that's fun for you and genuinely enjoyable and doesn't feel like hard work, it's a good way to get your motivation back up and to ease your way back into it. It's just to kind of find something fun to do with the language.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially after a 3-month project like this, like there have been many of my 3-month projects where I've felt completely burnt out by the end of it. And in that case, I would not start a new 3-month project right after that. I would definitely not go from one to the other. There have been times when I have gone from one to the other, but that's been when I haven't felt burnt out by the first one. So it's still possible to do 2 consecutive ones, but in general, like Hannah said, I would find ways that you can still integrate it into your life, but not necessarily at the same intensity. Like maybe you found the challenge or like this process to be very beneficial for you, and you might want to do it again, but just for your own kind of brain capacity and your own mental health, you may need to kind of postpone that for a few months and just have the language in the background, because like ultimately in the long term you want to do something that's sustainable. You can't have like one after the other intensive missions like this where you're truly giving it as much energy as you can, because you've got other things in your life. So if you try to integrate it into your life in very casual ways, like reading comic books, playing video games, and switching the language in them, then that can kind of at least maintain it in a way that has a very low stress barrier in your life. And then when you feel like you've recovered from it and you're getting that inspiration while you're glancing at a comic book or whatever, then that'll kind of drive you to be like, do you know what? I think I'm ready now to dive back into really pushing this up intensively again to the next notch. But you'll definitely want to recover, especially at, like, if you've done the challenge to the level that you've done it, then you just need to be kind to yourself. You need to kind of take a step back and decide, you know, I've done this great achievement and I need to revel in that a little bit. I need to be proud of myself rather than just like looking at where's the next milestone. Just feel pride in what you've done and enjoy the language for a few months. And then you'll know when that itch is there and you need to scratch it and you're like, now I'm ready to really dive into this to my full capacity again. But absolutely recharge your batteries, because the worst thing you can do after a burnout is just do something else that'll burn you out even more. So definitely recharge your batteries.
All right, thank you both. Ian, you have a question.
Yeah, I do. I guess through this challenge, I really found out for sure what the most difficult thing for me is, and that's speaking. But it's not speaking to people who I don't know. That's fine. It's speaking to people who I do know and who I have an existing relationship with in English. And like, as I mentioned, I work in, I live in Berlin. I'm learning German as well. I'm further on than with Greek, but I'm surrounded by German colleagues who do not want to speak German with me because it's inconvenient. And I now have a Greek family, and they don't always have the time or the patience, you know, when I see them to communicate with me in Greek. So, you know, not everyone kind of wants to speak with me in my target languages. Some people aren't good at it. Some people don't have the patience or the understanding, or they just don't have time, or they don't want to. So I guess I'm wondering, from your experience, how you best manage this and manage these people and kind of get the most out of them without it kind of putting them in an uncomfortable situation, or without it affecting your own confidence.
Yeah, Hannah?
Yeah, I can completely relate to this. I think that when communicating with another human being, it's only natural to take the path of least resistance and talk in the language that is easiest for both of you. And I have Japanese friends who speak really wonderful English, and we just can't manage to communicate with each other well in Japan. Or well, we can, but it just isn't natural somehow. And it's been the same for my Japanese friends who want to practice their English with me. Sometimes I just feel like it's easier to communicate in Japanese, and so I've been guilty of that as well. One suggestion I have, which might be controversial, is kind of butchering the two and mixing the two languages together. I really enjoy having half Japanese, half English conversations, but I can see why some people would maybe not recommend that, because it can create a kind of mixed up, I don't know, strange version of either language in your brain. But I think it's kind of a good gateway to making the person you're speaking to comfortable with the idea of conversing in this other language. Just occasionally peppering in a Greek phrase here and there, and probably their instinct will be to respond to that phrase in Greek, even if the conversation kind of fizzles out. Just introducing little bits of your target language in the conversation without being like, okay, we're going to speak this language now, and really putting them on the spot to only speaking that language, because it feels kind of, I think it can feel quite forced for both parties. So, I mean, I don't know if it's the best advice, but yeah, I found that a good gateway for getting people to speak to me in Japanese is to speak in English and then say little bits of Japanese in between.
Very good. And for me personally, what I would say, there are two ways I would answer this. So the first one is, yes, you'd be worried about potential awkwardness, but this may be more in your head than in reality. So I found that especially when I was getting into speaking Spanish and living in Spain, a lot of Spaniards would prefer to speak English with me because it was essentially free English practice for them. And you have to realize that sometimes you're kind of being taken advantage of. I was a professional English teacher and I charged like 10 or 15 euro an hour, like when I was starting off. And I was thinking, this is my job and you're kind of getting free English practice. I've moved my life to Spain. So if you really want to get English practice, move your life to Ireland or England or something, So what I've tried to do is, not in a rude way, but I have tried to put my foot down and really be adamant that I'm living, in your case, you're living in Germany. You really do want to practice German. And like eventually after I learned languages enough, and they were like, but I want to practice English. Instead, I would turn that on its head and I would explain to them in the language that I'm learning. So I would explain to them in French. Well, I've got a lot of experience learning languages now, so let me give you loads of tips. Let me tell you the best websites you can go to. Let me tell you how you can find English speakers. But I would do all of that in the target language. So this way I'm kind of, rather than give a man a fish, teach him how to fish. And I was like, I would teach them how to learn a language, but I would do it in a means that helped me practice my language. So that's one thing, is this like trying to like really insist and say, no, but I really do want to practice this language with you. Now, I would do that at the start of new relationships for sure. But the other issue is when you've already established a relationship with someone, you have a lot of momentum there that makes it very, very hard to, like, psychologically, even in your own head, you just have this association. I speak English with this person. So that's a lot trickier. So in that case, one thing that I've done is I've tried to at least get them on board with something that I'm trying myself, and I might tell them, oh, just so you guys know, on Sundays I have a personal no English rule. I hope that's okay. And this way you can still speak to them in English. If that's the language you speak most of the time, you can still do that. But you can at least kind of ease them into the concept and say, this one day of the week, just so you guys know, I'm sorry, it's not about you. It's just this policy I'm making for myself that I'm only speaking in Greek on Sundays. And then in that case, they will feel like, oh, okay, I don't want to mess up his progress, but I'll still get to speak to him in English. If he doesn't understand this story I'm telling him, I can tell him the story tomorrow instead. And that kind of can help if you create these little kind of language time boxes. And I've done that with people I've already established a relationship in one language with. Is I've told them, just like this part of the week, is it okay if we just speak in my target language? And I've just asked them and they've been okay with that. So like you can try to insist on it, and as you improve in the language, it'll get easier and easier because the level of resistance will be reduced. But of course, one of the hardest things is you just have to accept you do need new people in your life, and those new people, you can start new relationships entirely in the language. So it's not like you're ditching your previous relationships. You're just deciding, any new people I'm going to meet, I'm going to make sure I'm making new friends in my target language. And that for me has worked out tremendously, that I've prioritized that while also trying to manage my current relationships in terms of like steering them towards the right language if I can.
All right. We have a lot of questions to try and get through, so I'm going to skip answering anything for now. But if you guys want my answer, you can always ping me on the course community to let me know. All right. So next question is from Berling.
Do you want me to speak or ask?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you have two questions, so go ahead and ask both.
Two questions, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. In my experience, over the last couple of challenges, I've gone into a German deli, try to speak German, and my Spanish comes out. But then when I try to speak to a Spanish person, my German comes out. And my question is, I want to keep my German and Spanish alive as I move into learning Irish. How do I do that to keep that alive without polluting or slowing down the progress? That's the first question. The second question is, I would like to find some resources for Irish, such as pop song, rock and roll songs in Irish, books that have audio with them. I've been really struggling finding Irish short stories with audio. So those are my two basic questions.
Okay. Hannah, do you want to take the first question?
Yeah, sure. I can totally relate to that. I'm not a proper polyglot at all. I have bits of French and German from school, and I learned Korean for a little while, but the main bit of my language bit of my brain is full of Japanese, and so whenever I try and bring back any of those other languages, they're sort of coming out of the Japanese bit of my brain, and it gets sort of mangled a bit. But I found that what helped me is to really focus on my pronunciation and my accent in each of these languages, because for whatever reason I feel like that somehow separates them for me. So when I speak Japanese, I talk in kind of a higher register, and I think my French was also coming out in a higher register, like I switched into this kind of voice that's up here. So I sort of sat down with myself and thought about French and tried to put it somewhere else. I don't know. I don't really have any kind of concrete way of explaining it other than I think that if you really work on accent and having correct pronunciation, going into that mode and that mouth shape can help you to switch into the other language, possibly. I don't know. Maybe Benny has better ideas.
Well, in my experience for like becoming a polyglot, one part of that process is I kind of needed a particular period in my life where I was just learning how to manage all my languages. So I went out of, so in that case, it's tricky because you're about to start a new Irish project. So in a way, I kind of, if that's the timing you're going with, I would just focus on your Irish project for the next few months and just accept that in the short term, you're still going to have this mixing up problem. And then maybe after your Irish project, then you can have a period of time where your goal is to be able to compartmentalize the languages in your brain. So I had that period in my life where I was like, okay, I'm going to go out of my way to try to use my several languages all in the same short time span. And at the time, I was able to be social with many people from different countries, so I could go to an international event and speak a little Spanish, and then walk across the room and speak a little French. And obviously, my Spanish would come out when I'd speak French, and they would correct me. And that kind of, in the moment, I had to learn this new skill of how can I like create a wall between these two languages in my brain. And it took me a while to create that wall, but it's kind of its own separate project. So I would, in the short term, accept that they're going to be mixed up if you're going to take on a new language project, because as you know, I always recommend people try to focus on one thing at a time. But then if you're take a period during your life where you're not learning a new language, and then make your priority, I'm going to try and switch between these languages. And with time, you're going to be able to, especially if you have corrections from people who'll tell you, no, that's not how we say it in French. That sounds like a Spanish word. And they'll kind of help you get around that. The Irish one is a little bit more complex, but I was just looking it up real quick. If you go to shoppa.ie, that's SIOPA.ie, that's a great website for getting books in the Irish language that will be mailed. They do international shipping, and you can find ones that come with audiobooks as well. So that's one thing you can do. There's actually quite a lot of podcasts in the Irish language. Obviously, they don't come with transcripts to help you understand what they're saying, but you'll get exposure that way. And then TG Cahir or TG4.ie, they have a lot of Irish language programs, TV shows that you can see internationally. You don't need a VPN or anything, and they come with subtitles on all the shows. Generally, the subtitles are to English, so you'll see. Yeah, so I'll put the link in the chat for that real quick. It's shoppa.ie. Yeah, so that's one resource, and hopefully, as you look into it, you'll see a few more. And like, there's loads of things on social media. There's actually loads of people uploading TikToks in Irish, believe it or not. So search for the hashtag Gaelga on any social media channel, and you'll find people to follow, and that can be very useful.
Excellent. All right, our next question is from Carol.
Yeah, I am wondering now if, having done my first challenge in Spanish and I want to stick with the Spanish, is it better to do a second challenge in Spanish or take an advanced challenge or go on alumni status for a while and then come back and do another challenge? Or what would you recommend to kind of keep up that momentum? Because I don't feel burnt out right now, so I think I want to take something else on. I'm not sure right away or maybe in the fall. But what would you recommend?
You want to take this, Shannon?
Yeah, so if you're not feeling burnt out and you want to maintain the momentum, I would highly recommend jumping back into another challenge to do advanced or even just do a regular challenge again, because you're going to continue to get that support. You're going to continue to use what you've been building over the last 90 days. If you are feeling burnt out, I would recommend going into alumni, but since you said that's not the case and you don't want to lose any of what you've established right now, I would recommend that you keep going. So that would, whether it's just doing another challenge and then aiming for something a little bit different with your 15-minute goal. So rather than just being able to get through a conversation for 15 minutes, it would be to make fewer mistakes, to have fewer pauses, or to talk about something very specific. Like from one of my Japanese challenges, I wanted to talk about the Zelda game, The Breath of the Wild, for 15 minutes in Japanese. So that became my focus. So, picking something very specific and then talking about it for 15 minutes. Or again, you could do advanced, which you do still have a 15-minute conversation. And you could pick one of these as a goal as a part of that as well. The requirements to participate in advance are just a little bit different than the challenge, but of course we can always talk about that.
Okay, and what's the best way? Just kind of email you on Slack to find out more about that? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Benny, is there anything that you want to add to that?
No, that's good.
Great. All right. Aaron, you have a question?
I do, but Randy had wanted to say something, and I would be interested to hear what he has to say.
Hi, I want to go back to what Benny and Hannah were talking about. I lived in Puerto Rico for 28 years. And when I moved there, I spoke Spanish. Now I speak Puerto Rican. So anybody that's ever talked to somebody from Puerto Rico will know what I'm talking about. It's Spanglish, plain and simple. If you've never spoken a word of Spanish, you'll understand about a half a conversation. And I was in the airport community, so it was definitely back and forth all day, to the point where you just, to go to Ian's point, if you want to talk to these guys, do a little bit in German and then switch to English and then switch back to German, and they'll have no choice but to keep following you. And they'll either, they'll either follow what you're doing, but at least that way you're getting your practice in. And, it was crazy. I was at a party in Detroit, and I was talking to some people from Venezuela, and a couple of Americans were there standing next to me. And I just kept the conversation going back and forth. And the doctor from Venezuela looked at me like strange. I said, "I'm sorry, did I say something wrong?" In Spanish, I'm talking to him. And he goes, "No, how do you do that?" I said, "Do what?" He said, "How do you switch back and forth like that?" And I didn't even think about it, because it becomes such an everyday thing when you do it all the time that it just becomes easy. So that might be a good thing for you to do with the Germans, is just, make them switch back and forth.
I like that idea.
Thanks, Randy. All right, Aaron?
Sure. So it's going to be a while before I want to dive into another language, but I kind of in this fork in the road where there are languages that I will not, I don't think, ever run into someone on the street and hear them speaking, versus there are languages that are absolutely geographically appropriate for me to learn, or learn finally, like Spanish. So how do you decide between what your heart says, even if it's something just completely esoteric, like, sorry, Irish, or don't mean to say it's esoteric, or Russian or something, versus doing something that you might actually use and just be able to pop into conversations with people like Spanish?
Hannah?
I think that once you know, sometimes I'm talking about in English, you learn a new word and then suddenly you start hearing it everywhere. I think that you'd be surprised that if you learn a language that you kind of think of as esoteric, or maybe you won't run into so many people, or you won't really find so much of a community. Once you start learning, you'll be surprised that they're everywhere. So, I mean, when I was a teenager first learning Japanese, um, there was no one around me who, as far as I knew, there was no one around me who spoke Japanese. It was going to be many, many years before I could ever go to Japan, but it was something I loved and that I wanted to learn. But then I started noticing, like, oh, there's Japanese tourists here. I can understand what they're saying. Or you strike up a conversation with someone, and because you're learning Japanese, you talk about Japanese, and then you realize maybe their uncle is living in Japan and they have something really interesting to say about the Japanese language. I think it's a shame to think of languages as either useful or not useful, because there's always going to be people you can speak to, and you're always going to eventually you'll always run into someone who's speaking the language that you're learning. So I would always say go with the one that's more interesting and motivating to you, rather than trying to think about what's useful.
Sometimes I also wonder, though, if it's fear-based, like, oh, well, I can't learn Spanish because I might actually run into someone and then actually I'll have an opportunity. But anyway.
No, I'd absolutely agree with that. And I've never had that much of an interest in most spoken languages in the world lists, because like Hannah was saying, if you're passionate about it, it'll find its way to you. So in my case with Irish, I spend a lot of my week using Irish because I'm listening to podcasts in the language. And then when I go back to Ireland, I'll be going back in 1 month. I will be spending a whole week in the Gaeltacht. So I kind of, and that's the region of Ireland that uses just the Irish language. So I kind of like engineer my life to make these languages a bigger priority for me. And even something like Esperanto, I'd be going to an Esperanto gathering at the end of the year. So like I actually put off learning the likes of Mandarin for many, many years. And people would always say, oh, why aren't you learning Mandarin? There's so many speakers. And there just wasn't that real, true passion in me until I finally met some people from Taiwan, and they inspired me to learn Mandarin. So like whether you bump into people or not, like, obviously I live in Texas. There's a lot of Spanish speakers here, but just the way I create my life means that I actually use American Sign Language in Austin way more than I use Spanish, even though statistically there's way fewer users of sign language than there are Spanish. But I have made it so that I am more likely to run into those speakers. So yeah, it can feel like, oh, if I learn this language, it'll look better on my resume and I'm more likely. I mean, if you're going for statistically more likely, the 9th most spoken language in the world is Western Punjabi, and you never hear anybody saying they're going to learn Western Punjabi, but that has 92.7 million speakers. So why isn't everybody learning it? Because it's just not something they're immediately passionate about. Whereas the likes of Italian is way down the list, and yet a lot of people are learning that language because they care about it, because they have a personal history with it. So I personally would not listen to any of these lists. And generally, when you learn a less spoken language, if anything, it helps your career even more. And because you're even more rare. Whereas if you learn Spanish, for instance, and obviously there's many wonderful things I can say about Spanish, but if you learn Spanish, you don't really stand out that much. Like if you're applying for a job, you're more likely to be the same as a bunch of other applicants. Where if you can say you speak a way less common language, then, especially if it's a language that genuinely has lots of speakers, you're going to be chosen by an employer because they're going to see you as unique in that situation. But for passion reasons, I would always listen to your heart. The practical side of it, like people have always quoted numbers of language, why are you learning Irish? And I'm like, I can give them a million reasons why I'm learning Irish that are personal and important to me, and maybe they're not going to care about them. Like, I'm obviously from Ireland, I have Irish heritage and all that stuff, but they're not. That's not important to them. Who cares? Because they're not me. So whatever speaks to you personally, that's going to give you the motivation. If I had tried to learn Mandarin before I was inspired to, then it would have been a slow process. I wouldn't have cared. It would have been an uphill battle because like I would have just been learning it for this like artificial reason. Well, lots of people speak it. But until the moment when I actually had a passion for it, like until that happened, it just would not have been a good use of my time to have learned Mandarin, even though many people speak it.
Thank you.
All right. We are out of time, so we are going to head to the part of the challenge that I know many of you are looking forward to. So before we announce our winners, Benny or Hannah, do you have any final words of encouragement for our finalists?
Hannah?
Yeah, it was really, really wonderful to see everyone's videos. I've been kind of newly introduced to the Fluent in 3 Months challenge. I didn't know much about it, but I've learned a lot, and I think it seems like a really, really brilliant way to get started on a language or to improve a language that you're already learning. I thought you all did wonderfully, and more than anything, I could see that everyone's confidence grew a whole lot over those 90 days. And you seem, even the languages that I don't know a word of, you could just see it in the way that you were speaking and the way that you were interacting with your native speaker, that you had developed confidence over those 90 days. And I think that's more important than anything. So well done, everyone. I think you all did really, really great.
Yeah, and I would echo that. Like I said at the start, I was very proud of everybody. And something I've been saying a lot in these more recent challenges is that, you know, you're getting something out of this experience that the last year and a half, a lot of people have nothing really to show for it, other than like putting on some pandemic pounds or whatever. But you guys have been able to add a language to your mix, and you're going to leave this kind of less interesting period of potentially your lives. I know it's definitely been a less interesting period for me, but the personal projects that you've taken on mean the rest of your life is going to be so much richer because you have this language that you take with you. So be very proud of that, and you've all done an excellent job. And yeah, I'm very proud of each one of you.
Great. All right. So the winner of our challenge is going to get $250 in italki credits, as well as admission to their next Fluent in 3 Months challenge. And our winner for advance is going to get 6 months of link, as well as admission to their next challenge. So without any further ado, Benny?
Yeah, you guys won't hear this, but they'll hear it in the YouTube video. I got a drum roll going right now.
All right. Our winner for advance is Bearling. Congratulations, Bearling, on winning the advance challenge. And do you want to say anything before we announce our next winner?
That's the one. I don't know what to say. This is awesome. Thank you. I really don't do it for the rewards. I do it for the language and the people that I meet. So I'm truly honored. I feel like so many other people did so much better than me. So good luck to everybody else. Thank you.
All right. And our winner for the regular challenge is Benny. Ian, you are a winner of the regular challenge. Would you like to say anything?
That's I mean, I'm surprised because like Berlin said, that like it's amazing seeing like what everyone's done. But like I mean, this has been such a boost for me and for my family, and like the role that Greek plays in our lives. So, and it's even like it's a bigger boost and a bonus for my confidence that like you lot who are kind of pros and who kind of speak multiple languages or kind of think that I've done a great job. So that's another massive boost for me. I'm really chuffed. And yeah, I'll show my daughter these videos when she's old enough to understand them.
Yeah. And
All right, so congratulations.
everybody did a spectacular job. It's always very hard to pick a winner, and you know, you each have your own milestones that you've pushed ahead, and like I said, I'm very proud of everybody who's done this challenge.
Yes, you all did absolutely amazing, and you should be proud of the work that you accomplished in your languages as a part of the challenge. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close out for today, but before we do, Hannah, do you want to share one more time where people can find you?
Yep. My username on everything is Miss Hanake, which is Miss MISSHANAKE. I'm on YouTube mostly, but also on Twitter and Instagram and things like that. Really nice to meet you all today. Well done, everyone.
And Benny?
Yeah, you can find me at Language Hacking on most social media, either at Language Hacking or at Irish Polyglot.
Excellent. And if you're watching this and you too would like to have a 15-minute conversation in your new language, you can learn more at fluentin3months.com/challenge. And we hope to see you in an upcoming challenge. And congratulations again to everyone. And until the next time, happy language learning.
Happy language learning.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.